Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the George Bataille's story of the eye of metal journalism. I am the death metal guy, aka drink tickets apply to well liquors only.
And I am the black metal guy, aka carcass of a gigantic mysterious sea beast washing up on the beach, stinking so badly it makes gulls reel in the air, and then exploding. Dude, that is true about drink tickets. Places where that's not true are pretty. It's pretty clutch to have drink tickets applied to non-well liquor.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. Half the time I get drink tickets, they won't even apply to liquor. It's like bottom shelf beer only. It's like, yeah, you can have a Pabst, a Bud, or a Rolling Rock.
I used to work at a place where, like, unfailingly, the DJs would always just, with their tickets and everyone they knew, they'd just always ask for Jameson shots. They're like, which is, on the one hand, Jameson is kind of overpriced, so they're getting their money's worth. On the other, it's like, expand your horizons, bro.
Well, I think if you're going to do whiskey shots, Jameson is one of the easiest. I think it's one of the smoothest, like, commonly available whiskeys. I'd rather do shots of Jameson than Jack any day.
Oh, sure. Jack has, like... Yeah, I think if you're going to go for, like, kind of a low... You might as well... If you're going for Jack, you might as well go for Jim Beam or something.
I'm actually more of a Jim Beam guy than Jack when it comes to just, whiskey cokes.
I think that's more honest. Jim Beam is intrinsically sweet, and Jack... And it's just smoother, and it still tastes like whiskey. Whereas Jack feels like it has unnecessary bite.
Jack is trying to prove itself.
Exactly. It's almost like they make the whiskey, and then they have someone go around and like add extra alcohol.
Yeah, it's like
what I mean.
It's like, yeah, you're a real man now.
Yeah, it's not like higher ABV or whatever, but it's just yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, so we'll never get the Jack Daniel's sponsorship that that is so coveted in the extreme metal world.
I'm shooting for more of maybe a Thunderbird or Wild Irish Rose sponsorship for our show.
How about Jägermeister?
I don't really like Jaeger though.
Yeah, but as far as things associated with Lemmy, yeah. I mean, I like Jaeger fine, but it's definitely a special occasions drink.
Yeah, I'll just do Jaeger bombs when people are doing them sometimes. That's about it.
Yeah. All right. So now that you know that we are super cool guys who do enjoy a drink now and again.
Yeah, I do beer.
Yeah.
So we got a show to do, don't we? Terminus news. What's going on in the greater Terminus co-prosperity sphere?
We're
in that weird spot before the holiday season, before the end of the year explodes, in that liminal space of the first week and a half, 2 weeks before Christmas, where things are kind of quiet.
Yeah, they're kind of like, we're kind of in between, but there's plenty of big stuff that's happened that we haven't covered. Still trying to decide whether we're going to cover Horna next week. So I think as far as immediate Terminus news, we should let you know we've got some more special content coming out. We had that new Mahagian interview last week that the Death Metal guy did a great job on. And we've got later this week, I think we got a Heretical Sect interview coming out. Mm-hmm. Also, yesterday I had the pleasure of talking to the guys from Sepulchral Curse. So we will have a Finnish Black Death interview coming out in the next week or two.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you gotta keep cranking out these interviews. Jesus.
Yeah. So other than that, we've got I thought, there's something that sort of slipped by us because it's a reissue, but our buddies in Hessian Firm just had a new release. They decided to reissue a 2013 album called Dark Fears Behind the Door by Asgard's Rye, the band from the Philippines.
But very strange name for a Filipino band.
It really is, yeah. I mean, hey, everyone likes Vikings. But the music doesn't seem very Viking at all, which is interesting. I think it's probably in that category of extreme metal bands that start with one theme and then find their way to another.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's we're just gonna sample about 2 minutes of a random track from it. What title looks good to you?
Well, they're all very metal titles. I'm kind of inclined to go against my immediate impulse to do like Night of the Succubus or something. And how about we do one of the most epic sounding ones, the second to last track, The Distant Kingdom of Aldebaran.
All right, cool. Yeah, maybe that could be a cool one. That's either it could be 4 minutes of ambient, but it could also be
it has lyrics, so it's probably a song.
We gonna start at the beginning?
Yeah, let's just start from the top and for a couple minutes see what happens.
All right, here we go.
Okay, never mind. We'll do something else.
Okay, that was the ambient track. All right, so Night of the Succubus it is.
All right, let's do it. Okay, that's actually really cool.
That's fucking sick.
Well, I like Hessian Firm sticking close to the sort of anusite tradition of like everything it produces like either really like kind of surprisingly intellectual and sort of classically informed Black Death stuff, but then occasionally you just get like Beharit.
Yeah, dude, but with really good riffing. What struck me that this reminds me a little bit of like maybe this is how Beharit riffs on Oath of Black Blood sound if we could hear them.
Or it's like Drawing Down the Moon with riffs.
Yeah, or with Playing in Time. Yeah. The slow riffs on Drawing Down the Moon are great.
Yeah.
But
here the slow riffs are a little more Celtic frosty.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like this is pretty. It's like that idea of making something that sounds very early '90s, but not like any of the early '90s stuff by drawing on the '80s. It's like there's all the melodic ideas here come basically from just the most extreme parts of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost, and it's just like let's add blast beats.
Oh yeah, doesn't this seem like something that would be released on like Bestial Burst?
I could see that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It definitely grinds. We've been talking a lot about liking things that sound old but grind. Mm-hmm. Definitely grinds. Really cool detail on some of those scale runs.
And I always love the babbling, like delay drenched vocal stuff.
Welcome, Princess of the Night, to my place of sleep. The years have reclaimed my flesh as I rot in my quiet tomb. You have the face of deathly passion, unholy daughter of night. Sweet nectar trickling down, love bleeding lust. With our fluids, let us paint images of morbid lust. Okay, anyway.
Our orgasm comes with deathly horror. Fuck yeah. Sweet. Oh man, that's pretty tight. I think I might have to grab a copy of this. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, what do you know? Hessian Firm does it again. I was
it's like they have good taste or something. It's weird.
I think they just have some of the best quality control on any nowadays label. I've heard it's like their relentless autism prevents them from making missteps.
Well, I don't understand where they keep finding these bands, because it's like all these bands that they end up picking up I've never heard of before, and it's usually in these sort of almost like dead styles. In a way, you thought everyone stopped making music like this past like 1998 or something, but they keep digging them up somehow.
Yeah, I was apropos of that, I was talking with Nick, and he explained that like he sees like the focus of the label shifting towards like zeroing in on like what they call dark metal. Mm-hmm. And when we hear that, we usually think like this is like Bethlehem, Terminus or something, and I asked him what they meant by that, and he says, oh, like black death metal that doesn't sound like, fucking Belphegor or, blasphemy and war metal. Mm-hmm. And although this is very old school sounding, it does sound kind of like Beharit. I think it's a decent example of like what, it's like dark metal is a wide ranging concept, and you could definitely hear it applied here.
Yeah, I get the idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool one. So, regular housekeeping. I know you guys love us. I know you want more content from us. And a great way to get in touch with us and, as always, start developing the early fledgling stages of your parasocial relationship with your hosts is by participating in our social media presence. That's either going to be with me on Facebook at Terminus Podcast or with the Black Metal Guy on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. And then more importantly, you see how much content we've been doing? We've been doing a lot. We're putting out a lot of interviews, putting out a lot of episodes, and we're still doing the bonus episodes behind the paywall. What we need you to do is provide us your credit card details, the expiration date, and the 3 numbers on the back. And the best place to do that is either going to be Patreon or Subscribestar. $3 gets you access to all of the Terminus Prime bonus episodes, and $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server where we can discuss the finer points of Canadian emo and argue as to whether power electronics is better or different in any way from Death Industrial.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think on the Discord, if you want to like, the last 3 posts on the Discord are a Belgian beatdown band called X Vicious X. Before that, an early Belgian beatdown band called Do or Die, The Meaning of Honor, and before that, a extremely cult, bizarre funeral doom record that you found by a band called Windham Hell.
Oh, that's actually not funeral doom at all.
What is it? I just clicked through it.
Windham Hell. Windham Hell was a really cool old name drop band. It is mostly instrumental, kind of. The only way to describe it is like atmospheric neoclassical shred music.
I must have heard the slow parts. I was like, this is weird enough to be Thurgathon or something.
Yeah, there's weird, slow, ambient, atmospheric parts, as well as these like incredibly ornate and incredibly unpredictable kind of flourishes of neoclassical guitar. It is unlike anything else out there. They were an early artist on Moribund Records, and unfortunately the main guy, the guitarist, passed away after the release of the third record. It used to be a big name check band for cool people. It's been kind of forgotten so far, but I've been revisiting it because...
Yeah, I never heard of it.
Yeah, it is connected to nothing else on the planet, man. It is absolutely singular in every way.
Yeah, so if you want more of that kind of extremely deep cut knowledge, or if you're interested in recommending stuff for us to cover, you want to hear our take on some new shit, or suggest bonus episodes, the Discord is the best way to do that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to prioritize people giving us money. This is a system where you buy your way to the front of the line. We're like a corrupt Central American country, basically.
We'll shoot the shit on Discord and whatnot. But if you want us to take your recommendations, join the Patreon.
Bribery is not merely condoned, but actively encouraged.
So just to clarify, obviously you do not need to pay to submit your music for our consideration. It's just more like, oh, I want to hear your take on the new Horna. Well, if you're one of our patrons, maybe we will feel like reviewing the new Horna.
Yeah, we've already done that a few times. Ooh, yeah, sneaky.
Yeah, and sometimes our patron picks are great. I think we're both very happy we reviewed Dresden Streams.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so what do we got today? I think we're doing a mixture of in order, right?
In terms of sound, we got an odd one out. In terms of kind of general vibe or themes, I think we've got a fairly two distinct halves. Mm-hmm. Our first half has more of a mystical or occult feel. We're starting off with the new one, Arcana, Scrying, and Revelation from Mongrel's Cross. Mongrel's Cross is an Australian-style black thrash band from Australia, and this new record is out on Hell's Headbangers. I found their last one very interesting, and was pleasantly surprised to hear how much they've developed since then. All right?
Yeah. And next up, my first contribution of the day is going to be the new split between Hadopelagyal and Thorybos, called Conjuring, Subterranean, Vortex, out on Amor Fati Productions. I found this pretty randomly, and it turned out that Josh from Grizzly Butts actually did the preview stream for it like a week or two ago, so kind of a funny coincidence there. But interesting takes on a sort of warlike Black Death sound, but with some pretty differentiating features, operating within the same sphere but taking it into different directions.
Yeah, maybe both kind of very interesting attempts to solve the cavern core problem.
Yeah.
So now we got my second pick. This is a guy submitted his music to us. He heard our new Mahagion review, and he got in touch. So this is Catherine Wheel, not to be confused with The Catherine Wheel, a British shoegaze band from the early 90s. This is The Procession of Flagellants. This is a sort of independent release on the guy's own kind of label studio, which is Blood Boiler Studios. And he described it as inspired by acts such as Hate Forest and Bolzer. So I was like, okay, of course we'll review this. Thank you.
And wrapping us up, we have the second full length by Gravkväde. I don't know, Swedish.
Gravkväde, probably sounds like
Swedish band.
Gravkväde.
Yeah, with Grav Ruin out on VGDK Records, which I believe may be their own imprint on the cassette, and of course digitally through Bandcamp. A Swedish black funeral doom band that, again, I kind of found out of nowhere. Okay, so first up, Mongrel's Cross with Arcana, Scrying, and Revelation. And I remember you were thinking of doing this one a little while back, and some of the notes you wrote is like, you know, can the pure riffing and melodic quality overcome the death metal guy's contempt for black thrash?
Yes.
It's specifically the Aussie style of black thrash that I've really never enjoyed.
Yeah, well, neither of us is a big fan of D666. Although I do like certain, you can't, Satan's Hammer, you can't deny. But yeah, I think both of us are Destroyer 666 skeptics. But I do like a lot of other things in that vein. Whereas,
well, like what? Are you a Gospel of the Horns guy?
Really love Gospel of the Horns. Yeah, that's and just things from other countries that are kind of like that. You know, I mean, Scythian from the UK, Ares Kingdom or House of Atreus from the US. Also, you know, I think the Brazier we reviewed last week had a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's also just Slaughterlord and shit. Which
yeah.
I assume you like Slaughterlord. Also, Armored Angel.
Slaughterlord is cool. Obviously not in the traditional milieu of Aussie black thrash, but
it is kind of black thrash.
Well, I was going to say like Sadistic Execution.
Sadistic. I see. Yeah, Sadistic. Yeah, Armored Angel. I really like, and I think spiritually, Mongrel's Cross kind of has a lot in common with Armored Angel, although the sound is totally different.
Well, definitely in its indebtedness to, and I think. So spoilers. This is the first good black thrash album. This is a great record. I enjoyed this so much more than I was expecting to. This is my favorite record of the night, actually.
Same. Yeah, hands down.
Yeah, this is phenomenally good, and I think the missing link for me, for the style, was this really deep connection to kind of traditional heavy metal, as well as kind of US power metal ideas. Which really just adds this much more expansive melodic dimension to a style that can get too fixated in a lot of cases on just these kind of like, yeah, it's like I'm going to chug on the E string, but we're in standard, so it's black metal, but it's also thrash.
I kind of get what you mean. Yeah, Destroyer has that thing where they'll just take I really like a lot of the ideas in Destroyer 666, but they'll use that kind of speed metal riffing, but it's not really, which I like a lot, but it's more like they're interested in just like the rhythmic impulse and intensity of it, and it doesn't have the heavy metal quality that makes a speed metal riff. At least in the ones there's a ton of Destroyer records. I probably like some of them more now than I did back in the day, but
But I should revisit some of the old stuff. Or on the other side, you'll also get just the kind of like leather jacket and sunglasses black thrash like Aura Noir, which I can't stand.
No, nothing different, very different from this style, but Aura Noir is pretty boring. So,
but you're the one who has experience with this band, so let's talk a little bit about the older shit.
Yeah, so they've been around for a minute. First came to my attention, I think, with the 2018 release, Psalter of the Royal Dragon Court. And it was the kind of release that made me wish I was reviewing metal at the time, because it was just really fascinating. It clearly had this Aussie sound, but also people talked a lot about the Greek black metal influence. Mm-hmm. So you get this sort of like, Rotting Christ thing with these heroic Dorian scale melodies, but they have this kind of strange harmonizations that make them a little more mysterious and a little more of an Eastern sound. But the approach to that was like totally different from what you might expect. So to get an idea of the standard Mongrel's Cross sound, which is their basic template that continues on this record, let's listen to Neurian Transformation from Psalter of the Royal Dragon Court.
All right, let's give it a shot.
Take my son's ring on the bed. Scapegoat to the
right? So there you get kind of basically about two basic ideas. And you get this sort of these swaggering marches, or these sort of elegantly building melodies that kind of like there's a kind of really cool smooth kind of rolling quality to them over the blasts.
Yeah.
And there's a constant mid-tempo feel, and it's really just different variants on these two parts throughout. So, you know, there's and almost throughout, this band uses these kind of 3-against-4 triplet rhythms. You know?
Yeah, they almost never, in terms of guitar, do straightforward tremolo. There's always a rhythmic dimension on guitar, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, that is true, and I think that's part of what makes it really good, is that, you know, it could be all too smooth at certain times, and yet there's this constant movement in it.
Yeah, although I will say, just listening to that, there's no way I would have liked that album nearly as much as this one.
Yeah, so there's a huge change. And also with that record, I mean, I think it presented... Psalter was fascinating because, you know, like you heard that blast riff, that was amazing. The kind of swaggering stuff is a little bit take it or leave it for me. But the interesting thing was that it all blended together. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. So, like, at its best...
Well, that's one of the things that black thrash bands struggle with, is getting a kind of smoother continuum of sound and style, I think. Bridging the gaps between the influences.
So maybe this was like a different version of that problem, because for this band it wasn't... Because with a lot of black thrash, it's just like, you know, yeah, okay, you got the thrashing part, here's the dissonant blasting part, oh god, we're back to the thrashing part. But this was just all this kind of majestic, flowing stuff. And I feel like at its best, what Mongrel's Cross did was they created this kind of horror vacuum-y thing. Like, which means, you know, like, basically horror of a vacuum, abhorrence of vacuum. And it's used to refer to, like, really intricate kind of serpentine forms that sort of flow over everything. Like, if you look at, like, Norse jewelry, or, like, those big Gothic letters in illuminated manuscripts, or cathedrals, it's like it's filling all this space in, and so from a distance it's really hard to pick out any individual form, but if you look more closely, it's sort of rewarding, and it has this very powerful, majestic overall feel. But at its worst, I think that record, because there were just all these riffs ranging from pretty good to awesome, that were all kind of well played, it could like backfire and could just become kind of like riffola. Does that make sense? So like I was interested
I get it. Yeah.
I was interested in that problem. That was the problem they set themselves, and then this record is a pretty damn convincing answer to that problem.
Well, I mean, it's got a convincing answer to the problem, but I think more intriguingly, it's not that there was any fundamental change in technique. In fact, I think that what happened, it just, you know, obviously I'm not experienced with the other albums, but just listening to that sample, it's like there would have been, you know, 1.5 times as many riffs in that same time frame on this new record. There is just...
That's true.
The sheer forward momentum of this music, the fact that all of the riffs are so intricate, and that there are just so many of them, really makes this exciting in a way that most black thrash isn't. You know, it's got this almost progressive quality, but not in the sense that you would typically hear that word in a metal context. And I think that probably what that is connected to would be having Proscriptor in the band now.
Big change, right? So,
which is funny because, we should probably tell.
Probably 75% of our listeners know who Proscriptor is, but those who don't know, the sort of black thrash occult mastermind of Absu.
Yeah, and what's very funny is I've never really enjoyed Absu.
I've really liked parts of it. Does that make sense? It's like, you know, some of it's way too techy for me. But
yeah,
like,
but I think
Shield with an Iron Face, and I love his lyrics. Like, you know.
Yeah, he's a good vocalist. He's an excellent vocalist on this record. Now, we'll get into that later. Specifically the rhythmic dimension that he's adding on vocals, which is such an afterthought for a lot of heavy metal bands.
Well, it probably helps break up the kind of the even continuum, like having that kind of punctuating it over the top. Yeah.
But it's like, even though Prescriptor is, in theory, only the vocalist, if you have Prescriptor on your album and you're already playing kind of an elaborate, epic black thrash style, you're gonna start moving in the direction of Absu, at least slightly. And I think that's where you get some of these more progressive and even more technical gestures on this record. I should probably just play a sample, should I?
Yeah. Do you want to do your sample first? Yeah, why don't we?
Yeah, let's, because this is a good example. So, Mongrel's Cross asking the dangerous question of, what if black thrash, but all the riffs were good and there were more than 4 per song? And also, one thing before we get into it, this is off the beginning of the second track, Fate of the Grail Part 1. And one thing I love about this album, and every band should do this, every song both begins and ends with a giant riff, which is how it should be in heavy metal, I believe. So, we're going to punch right in, Fate of the Grail from the top. Let's do it. So, as I said, I haven't heard the earlier stuff, but that opening riff, is that something you would have heard on one of the previous records by these guys? Because that is weird, but perfectly in tune with a sort of vision. You know what I mean?
You can hear how it's rhythmically and in outline, kind of like the riff on Nurian Transformation, the blast riff, but it's definitely... There were definitely a few riffs that were that good on the previous one. Some big climax. But exactly like that, I'm not sure.
Well, no,
I'm sounded more... That riff doesn't sound that Hellenic, for instance. And a lot of the big riffs on the previous one does.
Yeah, I was going to say about that, it's like, when people are talking about a Hellenic influence, I didn't really detect that on this, but remember when we were talking about Macabre Omen... and talking about, my thesis being, well, the Hellenic black metal sound, to me, is just black metal that didn't forget about Iron Maiden and 70s rock and roll. So I think that it's like, this doesn't sound Hellenic, but it does sound like they still listen to Iron Maiden. And more importantly, they're listening to, I think, a lot of power metal and a lot of Melodeath. That opening riff is very kind of like old Dark Tranquility in a way.
Yeah, like when we say that, we mean like the good melodeath. I mean, I said that in my sample too. I think like the kind of Greek sounding stuff has in a sense been replaced by stuff that sounds like Swedish. So early Dark Tranquility, Sacramentum, Vinterland, anything
on
on
all
that
of our
Swedish,
reference points we always talk about.
yeah, anything on that melodic Black Death Swedish continuum, but especially these kinds of bands that have the more sort of more sort of like glorious kind of big release feeling in a lot of the riffs. But like the intervals are so well chosen in that blast riff too. It's got like those, they're not exactly melodic, they're not exactly like the Swedish intervals.
Yeah, they're not like the standard diminished.
There's lots of fourths and stuff in that, I think, if I'm hearing it right. Like, and it sounds kind of like it just has a very mystical sound.
Well, yeah, it's more like this will be a left field comparison, but it's the kind of thing you would hear from like perhaps like early Borknagar. That kind of proggy, but still very in tune with this kind of like mystical or folky quality of early black metal, and I think that's very interesting.
You also talked. I think we were also talking during the sample about like, well, speaking of like the bewilderment of riches, then they do a really nice job developing that. Towards the end, I was catching like keyboards I hadn't heard before that are just really understated in the background. And then right as the sample ended, there was just a drop. I think maybe a key change. I think this band also uses those pretty effectively. A Forgotten Art. Really cool key change into a big kind of loping, kind of Celtic Frost rhythm.
Yeah.
Dark Throne. Yeah. Just really good.
It's smartly arranged music. It's got a great sense of pacing, because these are fairly long songs for the style. I mean, these are usually hovering around the 6-minute mark, but they never get boring. And I think I will say, just to kind of front load this, my one criticism of this record is the production job, which is not bad, but sort of weirdly quiet. And like missing a little bit of body to it. Like, I think that this, with the production of the previous record, would elevate it even further. There's just a little bit more like low-end punch that I feel is missing from this.
I get that. I feel like the kind of lighter feel is kind of consistent with the overall vibe, which is like this is kind of like, what if black thrash as atmospheric music? And,
yeah, I get that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think going for the lighter, they're trying to get it more sort of ethereal, mystical, emphasize the kind of floating quality of those blast riffs, in the same way they've taken away some of the kind of more dissonant swagger riffs.
I get that, yeah.
But, I mean, I think with the rougher production or whatever, I think it also sounded good. You know, it's I'd be interested to hear what that would sound like. Might be cool if there were rough demos of this to hear what it would sound like played kind of more live.
That would be very cool to hear, actually. I would love to see this live.
Oh, God, I'd love to see this live. Yeah, so let's go to my sample, which is, speaking of this mystic quality, which is A Magician's Prayer. And I was going to compare this directly to the sample at the beginning of... Yeah, so like in Nurian Transformation, you got that kind of like, you know, the swagger riff, the flowing blasts. You heard different variations of those on Fate of the Grail. Here they are on Magician's Prayer, and there's just none of the riffola thing. None of it blends together at all, and there are like in a bad way, blends together in a good atmospheric way, and there's like huge moments. So let's listen.
All right.
Into the age, I rejoice in the deep, and the knowledge to separate me from the unknown. After that, then the night, I synchronize with the sun, and that's from between the bones. You lay into the dark, I rejoice in the deep, I gaze upon the Lord, that wonders, no one else has developed his satisfy with me. The death, not the question, and give us right. Look at man, my all elements are aligned. Made love and dark man,
I wanted to direct people's attention towards that huge harmonized lead riff, but how about Prescriptor at the end?
Yeah. Well, it's also, I actually started the sample a couple seconds earlier than your timestamp, and it's a total, like, gallery era Dark Tranquility little guitar fill that brings it in. It's like, okay, yeah. Well, what was interesting was, like, how kind of folky it all was in this sample, which isn't something I really identified before, but these are, like, originating black folk metal riffs, you know?
Yeah, I hear that, especially, when Prescriptor first comes back in, when you get that sort of build with those sort of, they're really tightly, you can hear the horror vacui thing there under those, when those aggressive blasts return. They're sort of like, they unfold over like 2 of those slow measures, and there's like 4 parts in each riff, and they sort of turn back on themselves and move like Celtic folk.
It's really nice. You know?
Yeah,
it's like...
there's definitely, and there's always sort of that rhythmic propulsion and interesting interval choice that keeps it from sounding like, like black folk in a bad way, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, it is closer to some of the, like, really early black folk stuff that I've talked to you about a little bit. Like, I remember we played like a Bach de Sid Fiel on the show at one point. It reminds me more of that kind of thing. When it was like, okay, let's fully embrace these ideas. These are not separate from black metal. They're a natural accompaniment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an undertone throughout here. You also get it a lot at the beginning of I think Fate of the Grail Part 2 is very Celtic sounding. And part of that, again, is probably, I think it's a good move towards what's specific for this band. I think they've been progressively zeroing in on the right theme, from being kind of like just satanic, angry black thrash to like being kind of mystical, satanic, angry black thrash to this. And this has the mystical quality, but it's pretty medievalist, Well,
and honestly, it embraces the fantasy aspect. This is like... Yeah. This is shit for you when you and your black metal band get together on the weekends to start a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So you want something that's appropriate for the mood, but still has killer riffs.
Yeah,
this is what you put on.
To me, this is sort of central for me. This is like what it's all about.
It's extremely sword oriented.
Very sword oriented, exactly. And Prescriptor's got the medieval thing and the Celtic thing, and that's got to be in the mix here.
And Prescriptor's performance is really interesting because Prescriptor's got his own style. It's got this kind of it's got this goblin-y quality that you hear in some early black metal stuff.
Ison before Nightside.
Ison before Nightside, but it's also got kind of a theatrical sort of Attila quality to it, or Maniac. But what's really interesting is the rhythmic dimension, which I think adds a lot. He's really considering the way he's pacing out these vocals. There's a much more like 4/4 on the block way to deliver these lines, and he's resisting it at every moment.
Yes, and that gives it that sort of rhythmic tension. It isn't just some extra sound. Often in black metal, the vocals are just extra texture plopped down over the thing.
Yeah.
Or an extra little aggressive punch. this really, the fact that he's striking with basically each syllable makes it helps prevent any kind of riffola effect. And there's you were saying about Attila, yeah, he doesn't have just one sound.
Well,
right?
yeah, he's
so
got
many
he's got
vocals
a great,
now have their tone.
Well, he's also got a good sense of dynamics because there are lines delivered quieter and louder. Like, that's something that's been forgotten.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, he's really... He's not doing standard black metal vocals. He really is embodying this kind of storytelling. He really is kind of the narrator for the music more than a singer, if that makes sense.
I get what you mean. But in another sense, I think it's not what black metal vocals became. I get the narrative thing. The narrative thing is distinct. Mm-hmm. Yes. He's storytelling. Maybe he's doing incantations, but it's not the same as like this kind of channeling the gods screeching. That's very common, right? It's
No, man, he's the dungeon master.
But also, a thing it has is for people who are used to nowadays BM, even stuff that's supposed to be raw, certainly the people who listen to nowadays medieval black metal, these vocals will make them uncomfortable, which is exactly how it should be.
They'll definitely think it's
some people will hear it and think it's bad or cheesy.
They'll think it's weak, I think, is what they'll think. They'll think that it's it's not strong enough. No, he's got plenty of power. I've heard Absu where he's kind of a little more screechy than this. Mm-hmm. He's got plenty of power in his vocals. He's doing something deliberately pared back here a little bit.
But but there was that great rising intensity towards the back end of that, and he starts doing I've got another great vocal sample, but he starts doing really crazy shit as that escalates. Let's go to your next one.
Okay, so this is, I think I've decided that if a record is hard to sample, that's usually a good sign. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because a lot of these songs, I'll fully admit, most of the songs on this album have kind of similar structures. They progress in similar ways. You've got a huge peak at the beginning of like a giant storming riff, and then it'll kind of chill out and move into these more kind of like mid-paced thrashy directions. You'll have an ebb and flow, and then it'll have a huge climax riff at the end. So that makes it a little bit challenging to sample. But here were a couple unique things off the final track on the album called The Whispering Void that I thought were really interesting.
Maybe never penetrating, never waiting, never broken. Got to cover from the light, take back the lock, and the fear, double the lock, generating broken, oh, nothing, it's slowing, you're not before you know it, you're just stopping the darkness, now whisper void, it comes real, oh, not in the day.
Okay, so, man, that blast riff, that's an all-timer right there, dude. Like, because I described it as like a Caladan brood on crack, which basically just means forefather, I guess.
Yeah, but either of those, Caladan brood, I'm not a fan of at all.
Man, I love Caladan.
Forefather has more harmony in it than you hear at first, but this riff has a depth of harmony behind it that makes those two-note arpeggio shifts just soar. I think it's the harmonic depth that makes it. To to me, that sounds. I think the intervals are kind of like "Celebration of Christ's Fall" by the Hessian, which is very catchy. But that is just a kind of classic. You hear like a simplified version of that blasted, and a guy going "Celebration of Christ's Fall." Whereas, so this is like. I mean, I don't think they were influenced by that. It's just like this riff is it exists in the realm of elemental riff forms, and they brought forth a different version of it.
Well, I mean,
it's so good.
When it comes to elemental stuff, it's all about the micro variation, and like that medieval melody that opens it, the first half of the riff. We've heard that before. It's great every time, so please keep making that riff, but we've heard that before. But then the little like arcing change up, with that little climb upwards and then that collapse down. That's an almost kind of finish thing. But then you've got that last measure of the kind of crunchy thrash turnaround to loop it back into itself. And that's what elevates it from a very good classic riff to one of the best riffs I've ever heard riff.
Yes, that is an infinite riff.
You could play that for 10 minutes, and I would listen to the whole song.
In the realm of riffs, it is playing forever, right?
Yeah, it does. In Valhalla, it churns eternally.
yeah. You can. There's a certain tree, and you put your ear to the tree. So yeah, fucking sick. You got anything more to say about that?
No, man. It's just the goddamn. When I heard that riff, I was like, this is the whole reason I listen to this music, is stuff like this. And why can't... And then I was angry. Why can't all black thrash sound like this?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's sort of like leaving the black thrash behind. Like, the thrash here is an important ingredient, but it's definitely a good example of black thrash where the thrash is at the service of black metal ideas. Well, like, this just is a medieval black metal record.
Well, the thrash is entirely used as a rhythmic tool to augment black metal.
Yes.
Because like
it
we
helps
talked
keep
before,
things crisp.
Yeah, well, we talked before about how the problem with, where's the dimension that black metal goes into to expand? Well, rhythmic development is really important. We've been sitting on blast and thrash beats for so long, and tremolo riffs. Yes, you can implement these melodies into these more complex rhythmic structures and get something even more interesting out of them.
Yeah, the swagger riff at the beginning of that track that sets up the chorus, like, that's a great example. They're in black thrash mode, just like on the last record, but there's so much detail work happening within that riff to make it just punch. It's not. It comes from, the punch doesn't come from just playing it really hard in the way that a lot of black thrash kind of gets it. It's like it comes from the delicate coiling of that melody.
It's very, and also, last note before we get to the last sample, these guys are clearly just so much more proficient musicians than almost anyone else in the style. Because this whole record feels at once very energetic but very relaxed. Like they could play this album on loop for 2 days straight, like as a live band, and it would be no problem.
The whole thing, they're part of their characteristic is sounding relaxed. That's part of the majestic vibe.
That's one of the things that really elevates it. The technical performances on this are crisp and not perfect. They've left some human stuff in, but it's naturalistic, and that's one of the things that defines it.
Nice. All right, so last thing, I'm just gonna pick the fucking climax point of the record, and we're gonna rock out.
See, I thought mine was the climax, but all right, let's.
Well, that's the trouble with this album, First of all, it's often you who pick the big chorus moments, and me who goes for the rhythm riffing. But here, it's like, because the rhythm riffing is this kind of stable pedal.
Yeah, and the rhythm riffing is the climax in this album.
Yeah, they're really it's all pretty seamless. Like the bridge that built the bridge on that first thing I sampled was just as heavy as the big riff.
Yeah.
It's it is all pretty seamless. Everything's pretty fucking epic, and like because it has this sort of intense integrity to the whole thing. It's just one thing. You want to reach for the big moments. So, end of the record, what the cards may tell. Let's unleash. That was a really long sample, but I couldn't exclude any of that.
Well, it's like one of the most Iron Maiden parts of the record, really.
Yeah, big power slave kind of strut.
Yeah, power slave, peace of mind type shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, well, there's that moment at the end of Power Slave, I think specifically, where the song just, it goes from like, I'm a slinky Egyptian to like something like that, and it just kills. It's yeah, I mean, we were talking at the beginning of the sample. I mean, obviously there's that awesome thrash scream from Prescription.
That falsetto,
yeah, sort of witch falling down a well. Maybe eagle diving, if we want it to be more aggressive. And you know, that sort of the rhythm work before that big solo payoff, the rhythm work is just so good. You know, and I mean, I think we've already talked about why it's great. One more reference point I realized when I was listening to it was the best parts on Re and Chaos by Dissection. Like, with the complexity doubled, but similar kinds of, like, big, just massive heavy metal moments being delivered with a kind of black metal intensity.
Let the maiden flow through you.
Absolutely, yeah. So the maiden flows. I also thought during that solo, it just, towards the end, it started to remind me of, like, Jimmy Page soloing, which is not, you know, Led Zeppelin's one of those bands that's formative for metal, but nothing sounds like it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. So, I think, shit, man, this might sneak on a year-end list for me.
For me, too. Yeah, this is probably one of the best this year.
Yeah, this is absolutely outstanding, and it's like, well, now we have the goal for every black thrash band is to sound like this. So
it's, you know, the last thing I want to say, just like, you know, it's got all this tarot imagery, like what the cards may tell and whatnot, and we've got this sort of undead seeress like kind of like from the Norse prophecy on the cover, looking in a crystal ball at a guy with an axe. And this just totally effortless, floating, majestic quality. I would say that this is black thrash as cool wizard music.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's a real wizard quality to this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it helps that they recruited a cool wizard.
It definitely didn't hurt. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, great record. Really looking forward to more stuff from these guys, and hopefully people will recognize this as like, this is a moment in this niche style.
For sure.
So let's take a quick break, and we'll get back with something a little grimmer.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
Next up, split between Hadopelagyal and Thorybos, Conjuring Subterranean Vortex on Amor Fati Productions. And yeah, this was a random find for me. I'd never heard of either of these guys. These are both German Black Death bands. Thorybos has been around for a while, about 10 years. They put out a couple full lengths and a bunch of like splits and demo tapes, stuff like that. And
Interesting.
yeah, and Hadopelagyal is pretty new. They just started in 2016. They don't have a full length yet. So, I mean, would you describe these? We're always getting back to this discussion. Would you describe these bands as war metal?
Yeah, I've heard the name Thorybos before, so I guess that makes sense. Yeah, they do have a lot. Yeah. I mean, in the sense that, you know, the artier war metal, definitely not on the sort of like war black side, which is a lot closer to Aussie black thrash. Really.
Yeah. Like bestial warlust, that kind of shit.
Yeah, but this is for sure. This is something like this. If war metal always intersects with another genre, right? Like blasphemy, kind of with like primitive death metal or whatever. This is, I guess, this is an example of the artiest extreme of war metal with cavern core.
I was going to say orthodox in a lot of places.
That, I think if you took Orthodox and combined it with war metal, it sounds a little like cavern core, right?
Yeah, that's fair. They're all kind of feeding in with similar melodic ideas.
But that makes sense, yeah. Sort of dense atmospheric chords, big emphasis on sound quality and production. But, you know, I think we're both cavern core skeptics, if you've been following this show.
And Orthodox skeptics, really.
And Orthodox skeptics, true, indeed. If you've been following this show, yeah, we've talked about cavern core before, but just this very influential kind of, how would you describe it? This thing that started happening in like 08, maybe 2010.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
extremely reverb-based, incantation influenced death.
Yeah, we were talking about that last episode with the new Hagion. But then it also had this influence on the black metal scene, which is where these guys are coming from. And this is very frowny music. There's no fun allowed for either of these bands.
Absolutely none.
Zero fun, dude. No mosh, no fun, no core, no trend at all.
It's true, yeah. There's some quite heavy parts on this, but it is not moshable.
So first off on the split, we've got Hadopelagyal. And I think this is the side I'm a little more interested in. So we've got like an intro kind of drone track, which you're actually sampling, which kind of surprised me. A short black metal song, and then a big sprawling like 13-minute black metal track. And Hadopelagyal is, I said they were trying to kind of find the through line between orthodox stuff and kind of more raw war metal shit. And it is very interesting. I think, obviously, their heart is in that 12-minute song. That's clearly their mission statement.
It would be unfortunate if it were not.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. How would you kind of describe this music? I mean, I can detect, the influences for. I mean, there's a little bit of Deathspell, but I'd say it's a little bit more like Blood Nord probably some Icelandic stuff that I've never listened to, but these guys are doing it better anyway, so that's okay. A little bit of Aosoth.
Yeah, I hear the Aosoth thing. I think both bands are it makes sense. This split makes sense. I think they're both working towards different versions of a very similar idea, which would be kind of like, you take this nexus of war metal and kind of the sort of innovations in Disso Black and Cavern Core, and you try to do war metal with this emphasis on texture and sampling and studio as instrument. Mm-hmm. And so I guess for Hadopelagyal, the riffing style, kind of like that. I didn't really like the riffing on Hadopelagyal the first way through. That wasn't what really attracted me. But going back when I clicked, and it just sounded like, oh, okay, some cavernous riffing, okay. But like I clicked back through it when I was doing the sampling today, and even at the end of the shorter black metal song, there was parts where it's like, oh, that's a good version of the Disso Black thing. Or that's like a good, detailed, sort of has an actual melodic idea, has sort of different parts that interact in cool ways. So I might need to give it a more careful listen. But I'd say, those are all good reference points for me.
No, I think I'd agree. Hadopelagyal is a rare case where I think the riffing, for the most part, is kind of B tier. But it's structurally so interesting, it manages to overcome that, which is a very rare case. I'm always, riffs before hose every day. But the riffing is fine. It's adequate for the style. But what's really interesting is this wild kind of shamanic atmosphere. That's kind of why I described it as.
Yeah,
it's like
the atmosphere is cool, and it's not,
because it doesn't feel like a cult in the sense we do now. It feels like primordial. It feels before the written word, bizarre like Neanderthal rituals or something.
I'm guessing Pelagial. Yeah, in that sense, maybe it has a little in common with Antediluvian. Not
really
in the style, but the vibe.
I think so. I think they're trying to channel something.
Antediluvian is definitely at the cavern war metal intersection. This band just doesn't have riffs that sound like they're being played backwards. But yeah, so I agree. I think it's a very rare case where I'm like, the riffs are less important than the atmosphere, but because the atmosphere is so well done, I think that's the real center of gravity here. And there are lots of interesting ways to develop this.
Yeah,
so let's go to one of your samples.
Well, so my sample for this side is obviously going to be off the 12-minute epic track, which is entitled Perspice obscurum ubi ima reges lucem contemnes ad amentium convertes.
There's your DSO.
Yeah, there's your DSO. And I'd like to say, I got the hard C's right.
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
you
Latin.
did a pretty good job with that. Yeah.
There are no soft C's in traditional Latin, kids. Whenever you're pronouncing Deathspell Omega song titles, remember that.
There's your Catholic knowledge coming in.
that's more like linguistic nerd.
Well, because church Latin has smooth C's.
Yeah, they'll have soft C because that's not technically classical Latin. Classical Latin, like as written traditionally, though, every C should be pronounced as a K, which makes things sound very weird if you pronounce it correctly. So
makes it sound metal as fuck.
It does. Only hard consonants. All right, so let's listen to a section of this, and this will tell you what the black metal side of this band sounds like. actually, what this sounds like, probably more than anything we've covered before, is complementary.
I was gonna say that sort of like that choke on the cymbal right when it slowed down. That was really complementary. Yeah, what do you mean by that though? For people who haven't been with us that long.
Yeah, because so complementary was a very interesting sort of like slightly like slowed down take on war metal, really channeling the sort of like originating ritualistic vibe of
slow Beharit.
Yeah, slow Beharit, a lot of bestial burst stuff, very like technically simple but melodically bizarre sort of riffing. And this Hadopelagyal hews a little bit closer to convention when it comes to the riffing, although I do think
also
that's, like,
a little more technical, right?
Yeah, a little bit more technical.
Sort of the conventions of like closer to the conventions of what is called avant-garde black metal now.
Yeah. But so obviously taking a clip of a 12-minute song is difficult, but this is a track that goes through a ton of very distinct movements. But it really kind of maintains its momentum throughout, which is what makes it impressive. It doesn't feel stitched together. It feels very live. That's partly owing to the sound quality, which is like, I think that if they do a full length, they should kick up the sound quality a little bit more, because I could see this being a band for cool art people that's still actually respectable, you know?
Yeah, I thought the riffing was on the fast part was like a good version of a style neither of us likes very much. Like it had rhythmic inflection to it. It was tailor-made rather than sort of like just hit the skronky chords and hope for the best.
Yeah.
In the old Icelandic tradition. I thought that was good dynamic Disso Black riffing. And I liked the sort of Ride for Revenge beatdown section after that, or the Cultimentarium thing. Where it goes after that, I wasn't crazy about. It starts to sound very... you could hear at the end of the sample, it starts to sound very Isis Oceanic.
Mm-hmm.
Which, like... I mean, maybe I should just... at the first go-through, I was like, oh man, it sounds like Isis. I do like Oceanic a lot, though, so...
Well, you're just tired of hearing that folded into black metal, though.
Exactly. But, unusual on a war metal record. And I think for this guy, it has something to do with the thematics. And I just looked at... Pelagic obviously means has to do with the sea. I just looked up. I don't think the word Hadopelagyal is a real word.
Well, but, I wrote it. I wrote it in the notes, champ. It is.
Oh, word! I didn't see it.
Yeah,
well,
it refers to. Yeah,
I can see Hadopelagic when I looked it up on the. But I guess that would mean Hadopelagyal has to be a real word. So.
Yeah. So just like a really deep layer of the ocean. So it's it's channeling that kind of cavern core thing, but it's also channeling, sort of like proto-human stuff, a little bit of like a Lovecraftian vibe, because like the far future and the far past are the same,
and sure, the depths of the ocean are the depths of the cosmos, and that's where the fucking frogmen live, the fishmen.
Yeah.
That's where Dagon hangs out. But,
and those dogs that come through the corners of your house. So you have to live in a spherical house.
That was good. But yeah, also, I think this relates to a recurring metal word, which is Hadal. Mm-hmm. I think Hadopelagic is the same as it looks like the Hadal zone. And I remember there was a band... I'm going to forget their name. There was a band that was fairly true for USBM at a time there was very little of that, from, I think, Minnesota or something, and they had a track called In the Trench of Hadal. And I think I've seen it used in other places for that kind of Lovecrafty, sub-oceanic thing.
Yeah. So, what's your sample? Because you actually sampled the ambient track that opens it, which I was surprised by.
Yeah, I just sort of felt myself gravitating towards this stuff more. The ambient track is called... He put a lot of attention into it, and it didn't annoy me. So that's what initially struck me about the record, was like often, if you get like a 5-minute intro on a split or something, like, come on, man. But I listened to this, and I was like, oh, this isn't just a metalhead tossing off a vague idea of ambient music. this is someone who like listens to ritual, industrial, and drone music and stuff. And there's a sample on here, that orchestral sample, that I spent like 10 minutes trying to... I know I've heard it before. I think it's Debussy or something, but I couldn't find exactly what it was. But cool strings and cool drone. So let's go to listen to a bit of Shot and Drone.
All right, let's try it.
The sampling is really good. That's like, isolating those extremely black metal amenable moments in sort of early kind of modern classical music.
Yeah. We've talked about that before.
Someone's gonna identify. Someone please comment with what that is before the person in the band tells me. But it was a good usage of that. The drone sounds were cool. The aquatic sounds were interesting and seemed like he took some time sampling or making that. Mm-hmm. The swirling water and the sort of like, I don't know if those are drowning breaths or sort of strange being waking up underwater breaths.
It's good. It's got I will say it is a project with a distinct vibe. It's a very precise kind of atmosphere that might be hard to differentiate for people who don't just listen to war metal all day like us. But, I think there is something distinct here. And I think that he is, or the two of them rather, are riding this very challenging line of being appealing to Brooklyn art kids, but also being legitimately good.
That's what, it's work in a style that likes to... People who work in this style often like to signal how arty or avant they are, and the music is just a series of gestures, right? Whereas this is like actually high IQ stuff. I think this is somebody who has ideas and somebody who has definite ideas about where to go with things like this. And that's cool, and I think there are all sorts of ways you could keep developing it.
Definitely. So I'm looking forward to, hopefully we'll see a full length from those guys, and we'll definitely cover that, if or when that comes. Yeah. So, second half. Thorybos. Thorybos plays war metal. Maybe that's a little unfair, but that was kind of my thing. It was like, the first band, Hadopelagyal, is like, oh, okay, so I get this kind of elaborate idea. Thorybos, yeah. The riffs have like 4 notes in them, and one of the tracks has a slow part, and They go.
Yeah, well, I think if you liked the Hadopelagyal a little better than I did, I liked this half a little better.
Oh, that's interesting. So why is that?
I heard this as kind of like the more... If the first one had that kind of like impulse towards like, oh, this guy's really interested in sound and texture and drone.
Yeah.
I kind of heard that coming together with the music here in an impressive way. And I also thought, we're both fans of minimalist stuff, and to me, I think this guy does a very good job writing good variants on war metal riffs we've all heard before.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think the appeal for Hadopelagyal was like it almost sounded to me like a weird ritual ambient guy making black metal rather than vice versa. And I thought it was an interesting take. So, yeah, Thorybos is a lot more straightforward.
But it incorporates that atmospheric vibe in an interesting way.
It does,
maybe both of these bands would benefit from becoming more like each other. But,
yeah, I could see that.
But like, the way I see it is like, stock war metal riffs, well done stock war metal riffs, okay. And then, like, some really cool atmospheric sound engineering with some well-done stock war metal riffs, and you've got my attention.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So let's lead off with just this one has an ambient kind of beginning too, and then it spills over into the metal. So I'll try to give you some of that.
Okay, sure.
This is off Gate 1, Hamartigenia, which I assume has something to do with the beginning of Hamartia's tragic downfall, and these guys are both in the category of educated German black metal. Hamartia. Tragic.
Yeah, the press release for this said that the main guy from Thorybos was like an archaeologist of some kind, so he's really into kind of, again, like primeval human culture and stuff like that.
For sure, yeah. So let's go to, so it's, I guess it's some nod to the birth of tragedy, something. But let's go to, let's listen to this cool part.
Okay, let's do it.
So I think if you're writing a war metal record, everyone gets one da 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 da. Yeah. But I really liked the sample over that. The only thing I could think of that I think it's like a whale sample or a dolphin sample.
Yeah, maybe there's some sort
haunting.
There's some weird thread of like mystical dark ocean stuff going on.
The only sample I've heard that sounds anything like that is the the orca sample in Killer Whale by Underground Resistance, which is Detroit techno, where they take that sample and turn it into the riff. And this guy's doing kind of a similar thing. Yeah. So, I mean, we were both talking about that big kind of the answering riff, the big octave, minor 6, root. Yeah.
See,
what did you make of that?
you know shit like that. I don't know that.
Oh, I just think of them about how far apart they are on the guitar. You know.
Well, I was talking about that sort of phrase is something that we're really familiar with, especially from Axis of Advance and Into Oblivion. Yeah. That is a very specific phrase that they would use constantly. That was a component of so many riffs on Strike. Really.
Yeah, I was going to say that actually is very close to the beginning of one of the coolest riffs on Strike.
Yeah, it's in Evanescent Judgment of the Last Era. It's the breakdown riff before all the huge snare rolls come in.
It's the kind of strutting thing, and here it's cool hearing it over blasts. It's also just like that kind of idea of just this kind of downward slicing thing that emphasizes like the fundamental intervals of extreme metal. Very like We Both Love Spite Extreme Wing. They do a lot of just 1 minor 6 shit, and Misfits Devil Lock, which works like war metal. So nothing. All I can say is just, haha, cool. I like that big epic part.
Yeah. All right, so I got a sample from these guys. This is off the final track on the split called Temple Prostitution. And the note that I wrote was war metal. So let's listen to that.
Yeah, so my note under that was just, this has great riffs.
It was a little unfair because right after this it gets into this sort of like a doomy war metal part, which is a thing you hear in war metal bands, the big kind of bracing doom part. But yeah, no, they're very solid riffs. I just thought it was so like kind of hilariously on the nose. I was just like, yeah, okay, this is cool.
Yeah. I think it's very well executed. You had a similar development of that 1 minor 6 idea. I think that literally was the Devil Lock riff that came in for a second. Like that structure, root, minor 6, minor 3rd. But I liked hearing that little callback. I think the over the blasting. Yeah,
that was cool when they did that more like rhythmic variation.
Yeah, I mean, Old Inquisition, Reptile Brain Inquisition does that, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's like, it's good. It's just kind of funny to hear this after like Hadopelagyal does this like weird sprawling elaborate thing and Thorybos like, yeah, this is the song with the blast beats about temple prostitutes. Yeah, let's go.
Structurally, it makes a good split though, because you get this kind of slow boil, and then the back, and then the back end, it's just like, Hulk smash.
Oh, I'd definitely be interested in hearing these guys on full length. I'm curious when they've got like a little bit more time on the CD and a little bit more space to themselves. Because I feel like I don't have.
Is Hadopelagyal one guy?
It's 2 guys, I believe.
How many members does Thorybos have? I was going to suggest that they just join Thorybos.
Thorybos is like a full 4 or 5 piece band. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I do like this split a lot. I think that the big things is like I think they're both bands that are feeling out a sort of distinct idea. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that Hadopelagyal needs a more distinct riffing style of their own that matches the atmosphere a little better. And I think that Thorybos could just use kind of longer, more elaborate songs. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe these guys just should create a super band of 7 people making sprawling German war metal. That would be pretty sick.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Just get 7 guys in, and you've got, like, do a Reverorum thing. You've got, like, full complex ambient tracks behind the, like, crazed war metal stuff.
It'd be kind of like Ruins of Everast.
Yeah, you basically... Yeah, that's true. You basically do just get to Ruins of Everest.
which is the ultimate sort of, like, aristocratic, highly educated German black metal, right? Them and not go far.
Yeah, Ruins of Everest. This is probably one of the best bands in black metal, period.
And they got a new one coming next year, which is exciting.
Oh, that is true. That's coming out early next year. We're definitely going to be covering that because that guy can basically do no wrong, in my opinion.
It's got some antlers and a Greek temple, so I'm there.
Definitely. So I do like this split a lot, and I'm looking forward to hearing some more stuff from both these guys. And yeah, I guess Amar Fadi is kind of supporting both these dudes, so hopefully we'll have new material, and I'll definitely be checking out the older Thorybos records just to see what they're like on their own.
Yeah, I think that was a good pick, dude. I'm glad we checked that out.
Yeah, no, it was solid. So for a little break track, have you ever listened to Ayat?
Maybe. I'm gonna look them up real quick. Is this is Lebanese? That is not Damar. No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, so Ayat has been around actually in a long time. They've been around for like 20 years, but haven't done a ton of stuff. I remember I had, back in the day, their old EP, Al Nabi Mojrem Motaseb Dajjal, which was this, like, blisteringly fucking noisy, kind of nightmarish war metal thing. And it was pretty cool, although it was probably too intense at the time. But I figured we'll revisit them. You know, I skimmed through this track. So this is going to be one off of their last full length in 2017 called Carry On, Carry On. And to describe what they're doing now, it's kind of like, we talked about how war metal's a feel more than a style. So basically what this is black thrash, but you could not argue that it's not war metal. It has an insanely unhinged vocal performance. The vocals for Ayat are just psychotic in a way you don't hear.
The song titles are psychotic too, dude.
Oh yeah, I love the song titles. So we're gonna start up and we're gonna listen to the opening track off Carry On, Carry On with the delightful title of Raw War, subtitled Beirut Unveils Her Pussy Once More.
Oh god. All right.
We'll enjoy that. We'll be back. and we are back after some vicious Lebanese black thrash with something a little bit more patient and considered. We got Catherine Wheel's The Procession of Flagellants. And you were saying up front, this guy reached out to us, right?
Yeah, he's, I think he's dude from the San Diego area who liked our new Mahagion review.
Or you mean San Antonio?
Jesus Christ, I do mean that. Sorry, I was Googling where he's. I'm a northerner, but I was trying to find his Bandcamp page again, and my brain farted. But we'll leave that in because it's funny. So yes, from the San Antonio area, and he's had he's had some different projects, but the best known one is something called Boiled in Bleach, which I think has at least some Bandcamp popularity. I've heard of them. Sort of like a death grind band. And the Catherine Wheel releases on his own, maybe, label production company, Blood Boiler Studio. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Catherine Wheel shares a name with a also ran shoegaze band from the 90s, but, whereas it is surprising and ironic for them that they named themselves after a medieval torture implement, here it is not surprising at all. And it's a good name. It's weird somebody hadn't taken that in metal. So, yeah, kind of a Brodequin vibe right from the start.
Definitely.
So he described it as inspired by acts such as Hate, Forest, and Bolzer, and those are two bands I've always heard having a very close connection around this kind of like drone-heavy, kind of primordial, Indo-European step sound, deep in the memory. And so I was excited that somebody like heard a connection like that, and I was like, hell yeah, we'll review this. So what did you make of it?
So what's interesting to me is like, okay, so Hate, Forest, and Bolzer. So Hate Forest, kinda, he's using some of the like proto-Sanko ideas on the tremolo riffs, and Bolzer a little bit in some of the more kind of dramatic melodic moments, but the reality is if you're not playing on a 10-string like Bolzer, you can't really sound like them because of just like the constant octave harmonies that are just in everything. Mm-hmm. What this really sounds like a lot of the time to me is a very weird sort of DSBM.
Like extremely aggro DSBM.
Yeah, I would say that. So it's got this kind of forceful rhythmic quality, but ultimately it reminds me more of like the most chromatic and aggressive moments of something like Nocturnal Depression than it does something like Hate, Forest, or Bolzer.
Do you want to play some Nocturnal? We haven't done an external sample yet. Do you want to play some Nocturnal Depression? Because your expertise of DSBM is kind of like pearls before swine.
Let me find something that might make sense. So actually, instead of Nocturnal Depression, just because they've got a huge discography and trying to find something appropriate is kind of a pain. Something that's a little bit easier would be Total Self-Hatred. So this is going to be off their self-titled first record. This is off a track called Carving towards the back end of the record. So I've just got a little timestamp here. So let's give this a listen real quick.
Oh, thanks for the timestamp, bro. that's cool.
Yeah, no, Total Self-Hatred is very cool and kind of forgotten. Like, that first record made a giant splash when it came out, but then DSBM became very unfashionable after that, so they've still been plugging away. They've done, like, 1 or 2 more records since, but that's the one that's still, a real
You know what
standout.
it reminded me of, also in terms of, like, heavy DSBM that sounds like Hate Forest? Abyssic Hate.
Yeah. It's definitely accessing those
suicidal emotions.
those real early parts of the genre. And to be fair, this is one of the more aggressive parts on the record. There's a lot more sort of conventionally sentimental stuff on this record, but they were always like a little bit darker and more vicious than a lot of their contemporaries. And
for sure.
that's
More
what
change in the riffing, too.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of this Catherine Wheel stuff sounds like, in this sort of third-hand abstract way. I think it comes off kind of like DSBM, you know?
I was initially unsure about that, but then as I was going back through it today, I was like, yeah, no, he's right. It's the most dramatic parts of this record do sound kind of Hate Forest and Volzer, and I've tried to sample those, but a lot of it sounds like DSBM. So, let's go to, I think we both sampled from the same tracks.
Yeah, well, I guess we did.
So, let's go to the beginning of the first main, his lead-in is pretty cool, I will say. Unlike most intros, there's riffs in it, and he's just layered a bunch of medieval torture samples over it. As far as medieval torture sampling related to Hate Forest, this sounds a lot like Rotten Finger, which is Sanko's little-known murky death metal side project, which is also all about medieval torture. But anyway, let's go to A Defiled Land, The Raven Decays, about a minute and a half in.
All right, let's try it out.
And this, to me, is a place where it's firing on all cylinders.
Okay.
Just starting to open up into a very DSBM sounding riff there at the end.
Yeah, it's probably hard for a lot of people to notice just because it's so down-tuned. Which I think is interesting because that is, at least to my knowledge, that's accessing kind of the earliest Hate Forest stuff. This sort of like down-tuned guitar with these kind of guttural vocals still playing these very abstract interpretations of folk black metal melodic ideas.
That's kind of how the whole thing sounds. I mean, that's like a good summation of the Hate Forest sound. But the melodies definitely get more By Sorrows, he's got kind of developed folky melodies where you start to hear, oh, I hear how this goes to Druid. That might have been recorded simultaneously when Druid had already started, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, yes, very early elemental hate forest. I think that's right. It sounded like stuff on Scythia, the Scythia or Nietzscheism comps.
It reminds me of some of the early demo stuff that you showed me.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, no, I think you're right there. Yeah, that first blast riff I like a lot. That's a good example of like really getting inside the Roman Senko technique, you know? It's sort of like blah, 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 you know, kind of.
Everything should sound like a very a trumpet with the flu, you know?
Yeah, trumpet has flu. It's cures with vodka. Yeah, so the hate forest is very hate foresty here, and then he does this sort of, he's got this really loud drum machine, and then you get these this series of breakdowns. I think he goes main riff, breakdown 1, main riff, breakdown 2, back into breakdown 1, which is structurally kind of cool. And where you in Precambrian, which is basically hate forest, and hate forest, you notice these bits that resonate a lot with metalcore drumming.
Yeah,
this guy is hitting that really hard with a sort of beat down hardcore intensity. Like he's, whatever parallel there was, he's like making it explicit.
I think that that's true, but for me, I don't recognize it so much just because this does hew so much closer, at least in theory, to originating hate forest stuff. I feel like it's a lot more obvious on the Precambrian, the sort of metalcore drum techniques of, you know, explosive roll into slow, expansive double bass stuff.
This has the sort of brutal snare. The way he half times it, and he's kind of the snare just smashes through on each of those, or he has the kind of like dramatic kind of slowdown effects, or over the halftime bit. That's not so hate foresty. That's like, it's way more rhythmically dynamic in a kind of chorey way than hate forest is. And I think that's a unique thing he's contributing here. You can hear a bit of the boltzer in those low end runs, but that's about the only kind of boltzer I hear on this.
Yeah, I mean, Bolter's got this like distinct style, and like I was saying up front, it's, you know, it's based off both, you know, the type of guitar that he uses, which, like I was saying, it's a 10-string guitar, so it's basically 5 strings with 5 octets, so you have this perpetual like harmonized quality to it, and it's very hard to replicate that unless you're playing on a similar instrument.
What does he do at the top strings? Is he like letting them ring, like?
Boltzer's, I've, you know, just...
Is he just playing, like, really huge 5-finger chords all the time?
It's a lot of big chords. I remember, like, a couple years back reviewing some Boltzer tabs, just because I was curious about it. But, like I was saying, he's playing on a type of guitar that most people don't have access to. So if you're playing Boltzer tabs on a regular guitar, you're only playing half of it, because you could probably simulate it with an octaver pedal or something like that to throw the octaves on, but again, that's always, you know, that's a half measure. Yeah, it is a lot of big expansive chords, but a lot of it is really just having those octet strings, which substantially modify the whole quality. It gives it this whole like chorus feel.
Oh yeah, that it's a very difficult it's a different sense of drone. In Hate Forest, a lot of the drone is coming from that low D, or it might be a D flat, I can't remember, but very you know, that rumbling strick at the bottom, whereas in Boltzer, it sounds like the drone is coming from everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very expensive instrument to get. I'm actually looking up a picture of his guitar right now. It's like, oh yeah, that is pricey.
So on to your sample, I think.
Okay, yeah. So this is a little bit off that same song, "A Defiled Land, the Raven Decays," and this is the first riff that really grabbed me. because I swear to God, I may have written this riff like 10 years ago, the opening riff to the sample.
Back in your DSBM days.
Excuse me, those days never left. I'm still a sad boy. But yeah, this is where some of the kind of elemental DSBM ideas really start to emerge. Mm-hmm. So let's just go a couple minutes past your sample and try that out. So yeah, that's probably my favorite riff on the record. Just that simple French DSBM riff, just that dun 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 dun. It's, I mean, I'm sure that every kid who started playing black metal on guitar in the mid 2000s wrote that at one point, and there's a reason for that, because it's great and it's elemental. You know?
But yeah, well, in the context of a song that otherwise has this very dissonant sort of Russian blizzard riffing, hearing a simple but well-placed sort of kind of consonant melodic color is just very effective. Like, that's a big release there.
Yeah, it's got an outsized significance.
And if it were more flowery, it'd be worse, because it'd be like, where's that coming from?
Yeah. That's what makes it work, is the primal nature of it. Mm-hmm. So, here's my thing. Like, I think there's really a seed of something on this record. Mm-hmm. This is obviously very kind of raw and unformed at this point. But I think there's an idea here. My question is whether the idea is the same that this guy has in mind. Because what I'm imagining, as weird as it sounds, is a sort of depressive demoncy thing.
Well, that just sounds like a band you like.
that just sounds like something I would make.
Yeah, that just sounds like that's like your version of the Boltzer Hate Forest synthesis, right?
Yeah, but it's like, I feel like, so yeah, the Hate Forest, I get that. The Boltzer, I don't really like. This doesn't really strike me as Boltzer-ish, but this like murky kind of trundling, down-tuned, incredibly gloomy thing, I think can be elaborated on into a more complete idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. Yeah, I think that's it's certainly, I mean, yeah, there's certainly a choice to be made. Like, in the sample I took before, the sample I'll take here is where he's getting this kind of like, okay, let's take the Hate Forest idea, but make it more aggressive, make it more kind of dynamic and chory, kind of like Mylingar is a band that does that quite well. Mm-hmm. But that's one direction it could go. I think in terms of what the bulk of the record sounds like, though, you're undoubtedly right. In terms of total time, running time, there's way more of this kind of expansive, drony chorded stuff that just is kind of depressive. neither of us chose from As the Eyes Ferment and The Shadows Flow Over the Lands, and I think that's because those are very DSBM, but not in the good way.
Yeah, no, I mean, any time that we are picking the same tracks, that says something, I think.
I think the thing, like, I don't know that he needs to go entirely in that direction, but I think what he needs to do is recognize that the depressive vibe in this is central to what he's doing here, at least, and be in more control of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is clearly, like you wrote in the notes, we're using the demo process here.
Yes, yeah. This is very different from the comes out of nowhere with a mysteriously polished thing that he calls a demo. This is somebody using it. Yeah.
This is an exploratory sort of thing. And I think that this is a good opportunity for this guy to dig into. Because, as a guy who's done, probably a dozen projects or more over the years, you don't really know the nature of it until you get that first demo done and you move on from there. Then you get to reevaluate what you put down, find what the best material was, find what the real center of it was beyond what you thought, because I always talk about, bands or projects being like kind of living entities outside yourself. Your job is just to explore what they are about and bring that out, not to force your interpretation upon it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I remember that band Ludicra, one of the least annoying bands out of an extraordinarily annoying West Coast sort of Cascadian and San Francisco scene. But Ludicra sort of decided that their music was, like, female. They had a female singer, too, but I think you could have a female singer that would just sound like black metal or whatever. I don't know what came first, the vocalist or the idea, but they wrote the music around that. It had this kind of wrathful feminine vibe.
Yeah, I get that. You're letting the music be itself.
Yeah, and and that relates to the whole black metal thing, where it's like, yeah, your projects are different from each other, and they're not you. Yeah. So figuring out he's got to figure out the character of it. If a band knows, a good sign that there's a band either isn't good or at least is just doing a very narrow thing is if they nail the sound on the first demo.
Yeah.
That's probably one of those sort of down the line raw tape black X worship projects, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so let's go to the procession of flagellants, because that's what we all came here to see. We all came here to throw turnips at the flagellants. Here's just another part where, if he wants to focus on the Hate Forest Boltzer thing, here it is.
All right, let's go. Those fucking galloping doubles.
That chug was so ignorant. I loved that. It's like it's just a beatdown riff with like a little Hate Forest flourish at the end or whatever, or a Boltzery flourish. That was cool. Obviously that part at the beginning, Hate Forest would never play 3 chords in such short succession. But I thought that added a nice bit of variation to it made sense. A lot of dramatic change-ups there. Anything particular about that stood out to you?
Well, that's a really isolated part on the record where he does that kind of like ignorant chug thing, which is, you know, it's like the kind of thing that accesses Bolt Thrower in a way which is also a Hate Force thing. I think this is a guy who is picking up on a lot of Senko's personal obsessions and reinterpreting it within his own kind of paradigm.
I get that, yeah, you know, because Senko's really into Bolt Thrower, and that was all pretty Bolt Thrower, you know, parts of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that little slinky chord progression fill at the end is just...
Even the sort of aggro 3 chord riff is you could put on In Battle There Is No Law, right?
Yeah, that's true. So here's... Okay, so I've got another sample from the end of this song. And so this is going to be an example of a kind of an interesting and good idea, but I'm not sure about the execution of it. And I think that a big part of it is a production issue. So we'll just we'll go about half a minute further than your sample, and we'll just play this track out to the end. Okay, so I like the idea there. The idea of putting this sort of weird, flashy lead stuff over the top.
Yeah, good like gesture. It's
interesting. It's very unexpected.
Unexpected, but falls into place in the right way. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this... It's like, didn't see that coming, but I'll roll with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what damages it really is the production, which the production on this whole record is detrimental to it. It's so blown out, man. It's very clippy, and clipping is kind of fine, but the problem is when you have so much low end in the production, it creates this sort of like booming, warbling quality. Remember when I was talking about Panzer War? When I was talking about side chaining being too aggressive? And
yeah, is this side chaining?
I'm not sure if it's side chaining. It's possibly part of that, but it could just be too goddamn loud, especially for those like really boomy low end kick drums, which are causing that kind of like strobing effect where it feels like the music is like flashing between volumes constantly.
I kind of like that.
Really?
But like I get that as it's delivered, it sort of, there's a cool thing where like the clipping and the fluctuations make it sound like he's fighting the guitar. I think it's very heavy playing, and I think it's kind of, trimmed from the elbow a bit, which is cool.
Yeah,
but like something about the way it's mixed gives it this. It sounds like he's really digging in against inertia on the trem, which is heavy. However, a bit too much of that, and I think you're right that it's kind of uneven. It sounds like the playing is a little wobbly, and it might be like, to me it sounded like, the playing is a little wobbly, which I normally love. It's like maybe a little too wobbly for this style, but I think that sound might be getting produced by those fluctuations you're talking about. I'm hearing them as fluctuations in tempo or whatever, and they're actually...
It's a little of column A and a little of column B. There's a little bit of, like, uneven playing occasionally on this record, which is, like, whatever. That's fine.
The playing is energetic, which I like. So,
yeah. No, it's really more of a production issue where just the sheer loudness, you're getting that kind of, like, strobing tremolo effect accidentally, which is cool to a degree. But at a certain point, it's like damaging your ability to interpret what's going on. You know, there's definitely.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it makes it. Yeah, it definitely makes it sound a little bit clunkier than it should. This should be moving with a little more sort of fluidity.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really just a matter of just, like, making sure the shit's not in the red. Like, I always recommend, especially, because I know this is a guy doing it all himself, and I'm like, you know, when it comes to the stuff, when you're doing your own thing, cool down the mix. People can crank their volume up. It's fine. You know, you're hot to trot, and you want this to be, like, loud and intense, but the reality is, until you know how to kind of manage things at those really intense volumes, it's safer to back off a couple of decibels, let people turn it up. You know, it won't be as hot or as immediate, but it'll be clear.
Oh, that's how Hate Forest worked. Except for the demo stuff, it's all recorded, quote-unquote, quieter than you'd expect. Same with Emperor and Enslaved at the beginning.
Hate Forest is very quiet in general. And that's just based off this very cool kind of mixing principle. It's like, I mean, Hate Forest, it's like, I doubt that any of those tracks ever touch the red during recording. It's, that's how smooth and kind of low-key that production is. But overall, I think this reminds me of a lot of kind of like, remember the good old days of having a dozen weird CDR demos in your car, you know?
Well, I never actually owned them, but yes.
Well, I did. I had AttilaTheHun.blogspot.com. No,
R.I.P. Or R.I.C., sorry. Rest in chaos. Go with John, not fight.
No, I appreciate the sheer weirdness of this stuff, and I'm definitely interested to hear what this guy does. Because, like, if he's the kind of guy who's reaching out to the, like, weirdo metal podcast and is, like, serious about it, then he's probably going to take what we say to heart. And he's probably going to, like, critically evaluate his own stuff and build from there. So, to directly speak to him, I would say there's seeds of something really fascinating here. Take what you've recorded, listen to it like 20 times, and figure out what are the 2 or 3 most meaningful ideas or sections of this music, and that is your platform going forward. Does that sound fair?
That sounds totally fair, yeah. And, you know, like you said, it might be that the strengths of this aren't quite what he intended, or it might be that, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different things he could do. He could either play up the parts he's not emphasizing now. He could cut everything but the really exciting parts. He could... There are a ton of different angles.
Oh, yeah. No, because I would say, you know, I've started so many projects, because a lot of my projects, especially when I was younger, started as, I want to clone this band or this band. And then I do a demo and I'm like, oh, fuck, it doesn't really sound like them, though. And then I realize, oh, because this is a different entity. And then I let that guide me towards what should this be? What is... It's like an animal, man. It's like a house cat. The house cat does its own thing.
And he had his nice, sort of clearly defined sense of the parameters or parts he wanted to use. The rubbing those two things against each other produced something, and the thing it produced is not quite what you would expect. So yeah,
which is good, and you can get really good ideas, and I'm interested to see how he develops it.
If he hasn't heard that Abyssic Hate album, Suicidal Emotions, which doesn't really sound anywhere near as sort of wimpy as the title. It's I would recommend that as an interesting thing to check out.
Bissicate is crazy. I remember talking to him on AIM back in the day.
Oh, was he? Yeah, he was totally like actually insane, right?
He was a weird, drunken internet person, and he was like a friend of a friend, and we talked a few times and everything. But anyway, enough stories of old school AIM metal scene stuff. So, Catherine Wheel, very interesting stuff. Looking forward to seeing what you do in the future. And we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with our final record of the night.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
All right, wrapping up the night. God, is it Gravkväde?
Gravkväde. I think the umlaut makes things kind of flatter, like, or something.
Well, but
like
it's also different because these guys are
makes
Swedish.
It like Gravkväde. They'll correct us.
Yeah, well, because Swedish, it's a little bit different. In German, it usually makes the vowel like a more guttural version of that vowel. So, like in German, it would be like Gravkväde, but I'm not sure how it works in Swedish. But anyway,
I thought you were gonna growl the middle of that. Give me a good old guttural vowel.
Yeah, something like that.
There we go.
So Gravkväde with Grav Ruin, which we just found actually between segments, is out on VGDK Records as well as Transylvanian Tapes. And Transylvanian Tapes, we covered the Crushing the Scepter record several months back, probably in single-digit episodes for us. And guy behind Crushing the Scepter is, we would call him a friend now. And it's interesting because that's obviously the most immediate comparison, a kind of similar Black Funeral Doom thing. But I was surprised because you seem to be more into this one, which kind of took me aback. I was not expecting you to enjoy this.
I heard it very late at night when I was in a Black Funeral Doom kind of mood. I like, it didn't seem like much to me at the beginning, but like, it was pleasantly surprising in a certain way. Like, often when I hear like Black Funeral Doom, I think the best example of that being good is a band called Ethereal Shroud. You heard him?
I'm not familiar, no.
Super epic one-man project that takes him it's one of those things that takes him forever to make a record. It's kind of like this sort of depressive dude version of Macabre Omen in that sense.
That's a lot of Funeral Doom in general.
yeah, for sure. So he's I think he's got a new one coming out this year, which I'm excited about, but it's been like over 5 years or something. Ethereal Shroud's great, but often what it means is this kind of just like glum melodic black metal plus boring parts. And this sounded very different from that in a way I wasn't expecting. What struck me about it was it has very loud bass, and sometimes there are we've joked on this show before about bands where it's like, oh yeah, that's like a drummer with some pretty sick like riff accompaniment, right? And this to me struck me as like a thrumming bass line with a pretty solid band around it. And just unusually powerful bass that I think made the parts that are the most sort of bleak and repetitive, gave them a kind of immersive power that I found sort of both. It was heavy and also kind of had that sort of opiate pleasantness that you want with something.
Oh, it's definitely a very heavy record, no doubt. Well, it's interesting because you talk about Ethereal Shroud. The thing that I always associate with Black Funeral Doom is Nort, if you remember that.
Me too. That's what I thought back in the day, but Nort was kind of boring, right?
Nort is very boring. I'm not into Nort at all. But, you get a lot of these bands who are like, oh, it's Black Funeral Doom, which basically means that in our slow parts, the vocals are more like then
that is, yeah. Well, and also the slow part, it was basically just like Dark Throne with Nort was basically just like Dark Throne, but all like half of the slow part.
Yeah.
Like it didn't remotely sound like skepticism or anything like that.
Yeah, no, Nort is just the distillation of the boring idea of, Funeral Doom. Or
well, at last we get our revenge on overrated early 2000s projects. Up next,
exactly.
Up next, Paysage de Ver is overrated.
Overrated, but not bad.
No, so. I don't. No, not bad. You know.
And then I guess the better version of Black Funeral Doom would be like Elysian Blaze, which is sort of like Zasther by way of Funeral Doom. Not a huge fan, but I respect it as the slowest, droniest moments of Ruins of Beverast turned into whole albums. This is different, though, because this has very fast parts, which is kind of unusual for the style. And those very fast parts intersect with the Funeral Doom parts in kind of an interesting way. Because there's no melodic difference between them, in a way. It's purely a variation of rhythm and tempo. This is a band with an insanely rigorous idea. They have one idea and they are chiseling it into your forehead with a sledgehammer, And it is probably one of the most miserable records we've heard this year. Talk about no fun allowed, man.
Yeah. So whose sample do we want to start with?
We might as well do it in linear order. I moved him around, so let's go with yours, because you got something off the first track.
Yeah, so this is where I started, it was just kind of... I was like, okay, well, this is pretty miserable. And then at this point, I started in the first track, which is very long. I thought it was 2 tracks, honestly. I thought, I was just listening to it.
Well, you've got the sample break in the middle.
Exactly,
yeah.
It's a sample break towards the end of it, and I thought this was a new track. But at this point, there starts to be some new melodic color and some drama with a sample that's pretty good. So let's start around 8:30.
8:30 in Jaladod.
Is it Jala?
That's more. Yeah, that's like the Eastern European pronunciation.
Okay, yeah, no, it's Cialadod, I think.
Cialadod.
Isn't there a band called called Självmord?
Yeah.
Suicide. Yeah, I think it's just Suicide. All right, let's go.
Om du har en avsikt med mitt lidande så tala om den för mig. Då ska jag bära min plåga utan att klaga. Jag är stark. Du har gjort mig så förfärligt stark. Både i kroppen och i själen. Men du ger mig ingen uppgift för min styrka. Ge mig en mening med mitt liv. Och jag ska bli din lydiga tjänarinna.
Desire
it keeps going.
Yeah, well, that's gray and unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
It's that really is the operative word for this record. It's very gray. Like, man, there is a lot of modern funeral doom stuff has a, like, DSBM sort of sentimentality to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that on this record. This is just miserable and gray. And actually the closest thing, because Crushing the Scepter, who we talked about way back in the day, has some, like, bigger melodic moments. This is closer to, like, a funeral doom interpretation of, like, the Negative or Nothing record we covered maybe, like, 5 weeks ago, something like that. Just gray and trudging and sort of, like, psychotically miserable.
Yeah, you got the closest to a sort of sentimental consonant hook just in the piano under that Ingmar Bergman sample, which is, kind of like Spider God also.
Which is, yeah, that's it. You were talking about that. It's like, the Ingmar Bergman sample, just coincidentally, we've got, because Spider God's all, like, Ingmar Bergman themed, and now we've got the direct Ingmar Bergman samples, which is kind of an interesting coincidence.
Yeah, someone hysterically mumbling in Swedish over a piano like that, of course, is very reminiscent of Life Lover.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
But what about your sample?
So, I've got another fast part. We're kind of front-loading the fast parts. So this is off the second track of Hadopelagyal Fortard. And so what's really interesting is, so you've got these very fast black metal parts contrasting with these funeral doom parts. And like I was saying up front, melodically, they're doing the same things. Everything that happens on this record is usually a matter of rhythmic and tempo variation more than melodic variation. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to hear here is probably very similar to what you just heard. There is a single mode that this record operates in, but they're very good at it. So let's go about halfway into this track and check it out.
Den där korta lusten att trampa på någonting levande.
That was bleak too.
Yeah, that was also very bleak. I gotta say, I think a lot of this record is carried by the vocal performance, which is really fucking desperate and extreme. Like, and it's always double tracked, so you have this, like, weird kind of delay effect to it. It's like, and I guess the more interesting thing is this really isn't a record with riffs, in a way.
Yeah, I'm sort of realizing that as we listen to it again. It's like, there's something, I like this texture it's undoubtedly true that you could have this textural effect and these sort of chord, uncomfortable kind of sublimely uncomfortable chord changes. You could have those with more riffs. You know, there could be a little more, just a little more melodic shape to some of these things. I think would give the music a little more punch.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with that, but at the same time, kind of confronting the music on its own terms, I almost think that's deliberate.
I get that it's deliberate, yeah, but
yeah, because these riffs are ultimately, what are they? Particularly the fast black metal riffs. They are the sort of the barest bones framework of like Swedish black metal. Mm-hmm. You know, these very simple half a step down, half a step up kind of arrangements. You know, you'll play around with the upper string on the power chord a little bit, but that's ultimately what it is. And like you were saying, I do think that's deliberate. They're a haze. And
it's not that they can't play riffs. There's been a deliberate effort to really pare this back.
Yeah, these are these enormous sprawling songs. Like I wrote in the notes, these are huge sprawling songs without any parts. They're just these kind of funereal processions, you know, fucking 10 plus minutes long of just this wandering around in this gray landscape. And I appreciate the rigor of that.
Oh, for sure. I think as far as I think that sampling, this is another record where sampling does not do it justice, because I can just know that re-listening to it with where we're jumping to what we take to be the cool parts has nothing like the impact it had listened to whole.
You're supposed to listen to this drunk at 4 a.m.
There's also an accumulating weight kind of thing where I think each of the little micro variations is more meaningful once you've heard the bleary thing before it. It comes as a bigger shift. It's difficult to sample. Should be taken in at a whole very late at night.
Definitely late at night and miserable is the way to listen to this. Probably true for all kind of black funeral doom stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the ethereal shroud is nice for walking around in the falling snow in December.
Then it's not funeral doom.
No, well, skepticism isn't miserable. Skepticism is uplifting.
Skepticism is so one of a kind, though. You know,
Thergothon's uplifting too, bro.
Thergothon is not uplifting.
Yeah, it is.
Thergothon is alien. Thergothon exists in a reality completely. Skepticism imagines a world devoid of humans or animals.
I think it's got animals in it. It's got crows.
You think it's got animals?
It's got trees and animals.
It's got a crow. A single crow. All right?
It's certainly not very human music. It's certainly
very inhuman.
Coming from the mountains.
And Thergothon is Thergothon is about the sun turning into a red giant and the slow dissolving of Earth into nothingness as Lovecraftian aliens come in to occupy the void where Earth once existed. But anyway,
well, that's your take on Thergothon. I hear what you mean though. It's very. This is refusing. Ethereal Shroud makes all sorts of gestures towards more conventionally exciting music. It's much more black metal influenced. It's and kind of deliberately sentimental. Whereas this is totally not that.
Oh man, this is not sentimental. But
all right.
So we've got a couple samples off of the big one, the 18-minute closer track.
Begravningskur. Yeah. And this is in my notes. I just have here's a funeral doom part. It's funereal.
Right. So, yeah, I've got a Funeral Doom part for this to prove that this is actually a Funeral Doom record at its core.
Yeah.
We got a couple Funeral Doom sections off this, so let's try it out. God, it's like you can hear them actively resisting the big consonant Funeral Doom melody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I find so intriguing about this record. Is the sheer rigor of it and the unwillingness to, participate in Funeral Doom. As a lot of it is nowadays.
Sort of an unwillingness to participate in, like, music.
An unwillingness to participate in life.
Yeah, it will not be complicit with your ideas of melody or excitement or... and yeah, I think it's like the blast beat parts really are just Funeral Doom parts with blast beats under them, right? It's
Yeah, because like a lot of the time you'll have these giant like 2 to 3 minute sections where you'll have the blast beat version of this like Swedish black metal skeleton riff, and then they'll just do the Funeral Doom version of it. Yeah. It's like, okay, now we'll just play it in whole notes instead of tremolo. This really is music that's supposed to be the soundtrack for a sort of like internal personal confrontation, isn't it? Like, you're not supposed to like listen to this normally, are you?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're both normally pretty depressed, so it's...
Well, maybe... yeah, we're doing a metal podcast. We should be.
Yeah, true. Yeah, well, it's certainly not just throw on to have a good time music, that's for sure. Yeah. I think it is more kind of... It is more exciting and hard-hitting. I think it's heavier than any single isolated sample of this suggests. There really is something you're not getting through hearing the samples. Also, I swear the bass was louder to me when I listened to it on my phone. I think if you can listen to this with the... I have my earbuds in. It's just something about the machinery through which this is being processed is different. Or the settings, but if you can listen to this with the bass up, I think that is rewarding.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of interested because, when we covered that Crushing the Scepter record, that was something that I kind of said to you was the idea of the weight of this music accumulating over the course of these long tracks. And that's kind of what you're saying now. And I totally agree with it. It's the scope of these songs and just kind of getting crushed under the preceding moments of them are very important to the overall effect.
Each riff it's very contextual. Each riff has all the previous riffs behind it, and they're kind of still there. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of hovering in your memory. Mm-hmm. And it gives it this kind of like claustrophobic quality of like never being able to escape this place, this kind of landscape that's been established by the music.
There on the cover, if you click on it, there are actually 3 guys in the back of the photo standing in the back corner of what looks like a ruined cathedral with no roof on it.
Yeah, that's pretty miserable.
Maybe I think maybe a part of a castle, but yeah, pretty miserable. Lots of sky,
lots of empty space.
Yeah.
So let's go a few minutes later in this track, Begravningsscore, and this is one of the more active parts for my last sample. So
all right, big riff, go. Here we come.
Not big riff, but like a few riffs in quick succession.
Oh man, yeah.
All right, let's go. Yeah, that last part was a little bit like a funeral orchestra kind of thing.
Yeah, that was heavy. That was a funeral doom drop.
Yeah. You drop from 40 BPM to 0 BPM.
Yeah.
That's so that was one of the more active points on this record. It's like, dude, that was like 3 riffs in 2 minutes, man.
Fucking rapid fire combo from Chun-Li.
I don't, this is one of those records that's weird to talk about just because it's made for a certain kind of person, especially for the types of dudes who back in the day used to hang out on like the doommetal.com forums.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yeah, I did a new record. I'm going to do like 50 copies on CDR, which is too many. I'm still going to have 30 of them in my house forever. But would trade those to people on doommetal.com. And I think I've talked about this before because I've been kind of like affiliated with the funeral doom scene for a long time. And it really is kind of its own island within metal,
Yeah, it was, and it was off doing this hyper extreme thing long before and beside Sun made ideas kind of like this fashionable.
Yeah. It was always kind of in its own weird sphere. And tons of, like, fascinating things happened within it.
That will just be forgotten.
Yeah,
like the wars between the ancient ones and the the fucking children of Dagon.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's weird because Funeral Doom is one of those things that I've felt so close to, on a very, like, personal level for so many years, and it's kind of like, it's I don't know, I'll invent a term, a sensible tragedy that it was never fully discovered by the greater scene, because obviously it's just being able to process it and really liking it requires a certain kind of insane person. But
what do you think about stuff like Shape of Despair or stuff that's kind of popular?
Shit, is it even popular?
It's not that popular. I'm just asking you, like, do you like it? Is it good? Is it Funeral Doom?
Shape of Despair is good, dude.
Yeah, it's like more on the gothic side of it. Yeah, I like Shape of Despair.
Yeah, no, Shape of Despair is good. Mourning Beloveth is good. That would be another thing that's, like, a little more accessible. But the reality is, once you hit a certain, like, tempo, it's just, like, unbearable to people. Which is why, I think that you and I would both agree that Skepticism and Theragothon deserve to be in the absolute top tier of the heavy metal pantheon. But the reality is, you'll talk to people all day in the metal scene who have never actually listened to that music.
Both of those records are so rewarding and so much more alive than people would expect. I mean, especially the remix of that Skepticism record where you could hear the guitar parts.
Stormcrow Fleet?
Yeah, they put out a new mix a couple of years ago, and the guitar is actually really intricate and kind of like a Terminus, but in the original version of it all just sort of blended together and was just...
It was weird because I listened to the remix and I didn't think it sounded that different, but I've also listened to Stormcrow Fleet hundreds of times. So.
I'm sure I also had a shitty rip of it, It's different when you get the promo that has, like, the flax or whatever, I think that's one of the very few things I downloaded on FLAC. For Skepticism, you have to listen to that in the perfect version. There's so much depth to those tones, There's a pretty good band, I think. I haven't had a chance to listen to them enough, so maybe just parts of it are good. I don't know. Don't take this as like a total recommendation, but I was pretty interested by what I heard from the Drowning, who are on Transcending Obscurity.
I'm not familiar.
They're like, they're a little closer to Peaceville stuff, but like it's Funeral Doom, Death Doom stuff that moves at a little faster clip in that, like, super slow stuff that feels a little mid-tempo at times, but has kind of very minimal, memorable gothic leads and some big, deep gutturals. I liked that a lot. Slightly more accessible version of Funeral Doom, I think.
That's cool, and I think that, honestly, it's like, I love Skepticism. Skepticism's one of my favorite bands of all time. I am trying to figure out how to get a Skepticism tattoo, but all of their like art is so abstract it doesn't lend itself to anything like that. Probably deliberate.
I get what you mean, yeah.
But I think probably the bigger one is Theragothon, man. Like, as far as something that needs to be replicated and needs to be studied, Theragothon is just...
Why don't you just get a tattoo of that tower? Like,
I've thought about it, yeah. I've thought about getting a tattoo of the Theragothon tower.
Right over your junk. If you think this tower is tall...
But yeah, man, imagine the melodic depth to...
Babe, I'm about to stream from the heavens.
God damn it.
Sorry.
Oh, Jesus.
Sorry, we get to the end of the extremely serious Funeral Doom review, and all I can do is crack jokes. In all seriousness, though, like, Stream from the Heavens, like,
I mean, I struggle to think of a record that is more important and less appreciated than that. You know, a stone cold classic that no one has pulled from, really.
I agree. And people who like classic second wave black metal would like both of those things. It just requires a little bit of... It took me a long time to discover them both. It requires a little bit of patience. You know?
It definitely does. So,
yeah.
I mean, in that case, should that be our outro, man? Should it be Thurgathon?
I had a specific thing I wanted to play, but we could play Thurgathon, sure. Give the people what they need to hear.
Okay, so, well, shit, man. Let's just do the big obvious opening track for Stream from the Heavens. Let's just show them Thurgathon's Everlasting, man.
All right, cool.
All right. Thanks a lot for listening, guys, and we will talk to you next week.